In a world where refrigeration is the norm, the Amish community survives without the hum of contemporary appliances. They have mastered the art of food preservation, passing down time tested ways through generations. From noisy kitchens full of laughter to quiet pantries stocked with carefully hoarded treasures, the Amish demonstrate that creativity and tradition can coexist. Storing food without a refrigerator may appear to be a task reserved for survivalists or reality TV competitors, yet the Amish accomplish it on a daily basis. One of the best kept secrets, good old fashioned water bath canning. If you've ever seen shelves piled high with jars of pickles, peaches, or tomatoes, you've seen the magic of this strategy at work. At first appearance, it appears simple. Just put the food in a jar, boil it, and call it a day. But let me warn you, this is not a beginner's kitchen job. When I tried to can peaches at home, I ended up with a sticky mess, jars that refused to seal, and the frightening fear that I might not make it through the apocalypse. In contrast, the Amish have things down to a science. They carefully wash and prepare each jar before filling it with fruits, vegetables, or sauces. Then they lower them into seething pots of hot water as if they were embarking on a deep sea voyage. The heat eliminates any germs or mold spores that could contaminate the food, and once sealed, the jars can lie on a shelf for years without concern. It's like time travel for food. What you eat in 2034 may be the tomatoes you plucked this summer. Some canned items have been reported to last for more than 5 years, as long as the seal is tight. To be honest, I believe the most difficult part is resisting the impulse to open the jars and dig in right away. When I asked my grandmother about canning, she gave me this look like, "What do you mean you don't know how?" Apparently, not knowing the difference between a hot pack and a raw pack qualifies you as an amateur in her eyes. But the Amish see the talent as an art form, and those jars become a secret store for when crops run low or the weather goes bad. They do not rush to the food shop after winter storms. They simply grab a jar of home canned potatoes and start cooking. Now, for the big kicker, the taste. Unlike frozen vegetables, which can turn sad, mushy after a few months, canned foods retain their flavor. There's something nostalgic about the way Amish pickles crunch between your teeth, or how a canned peach feels like a little burst of sunlight in the thick of winter, and it's all possible without a single fridge in sight. That's presumably why this strategy has stood the test of time. There is no electricity expense, no chance of food spoilage due to power outages, and no fiddling with digital temperature settings, just jars, boiling water, and a little know-how passed down from generation to generation. However, nothing is fail-safe. If you've ever attempted to pry open a stubborn jar lid, you understand what I mean. Last year, I canned some salsa and sealed it so firmly that it took 2 pairs of hands and a jar opener to open it. My neighbor suggested I promote it as tamper-proof salsa and charge more. That's the thing about water bath canning. It's as much a test of patience as it is a preservation procedure. You must get the timing precisely right, or the jars will not seal correctly. And if you think that tightening the lid will help, good luck. At least the Amish don't have to deal with finicky dinner guests who complain about Best Buy dates. If it's in the pantry, it's ready to go. If you're Amish, you don't just discard ash, you use it to keep food fresh. Storing eggs in ashes may appear to be an unintentional discovery, but it is far from random. Long before refrigeration became an option, people discovered that clean, dry ash could preserve food and keep pests away. It's not only brilliant, it's also scientific. Ash is alkaline, making it a hostile environment for microorganisms. Without bacteria, there is no decay. Simple, right? You have to admit, it's a little ironic. Most of us think of ash as a dirty mess, but the Amish see it as perfect egg storage. Eggs are stored within ash-filled receptacles, each neatly tucked away like a treasure, ready to be broken open months later. It's not just eggs. Root veggies like carrots and beets receive the same special treatment. It's like giving them a warm winter clothing so they can withstand the long months ahead without sprouting or going mushy. The trick here is patience, which the Amish have in abundance. If you bury the food too soon or use damp ash, you are setting yourself up for a disaster. My initial attempt to store eggs in ash felt more like an unpleasant science experiment than food preservation. I went overboard with the ash and buried the eggs as if I was sheltering them from a meteor shower. A month later, I couldn't find them without creating half an ash mound in my kitchen. Lesson learned, moderation is essential. It's also worth mentioning that not all ash will suffice. It must be made from clean, untreated wood with no fireplace leftovers from your aromatic pine logs. The Amish understand this, of course, because they have mastered the wonderful art of simplicity. It's the same level of brilliance as when someone produces a beautiful pie crust without measuring anything. For ages, ash has served as a quiet hero. It was employed for food preservation by the ancient Romans, and it is still in use today in the kitchens of those who value slow, deliberate processes. It makes you wonder, why aren't more of us trying this? The only product we will ever recommend on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a seasoned prepper. It contains over 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis periods such as the Great Depression and World War II that are not available anywhere else. We chose to promote his book since we are the final generation that can pass on these ideas and superfoods to our children and grandchildren. It would be a shame if this information disappeared. In addition, Nicole Appelian's book on herbal medicines is available in their store. If you're watching this on TV, you may find the books by searching for our channel, Frugal Solutions on your phone or tablet, and tapping the link in the channel description or any other video description. We have fire pits in our backyards, but rather than storing eggs, we use them to toast marshmallows and burn old receipts. Not that there is anything wrong with s'mores, but the Amish have discovered a technique to convert leftover ashes into pure preservation gold. Speaking of turning back the clock, wouldn't it be good if we could store other things in ash to preserve them from deteriorating, such as our joints? I'd gladly bury my knees in a pail of ash if it meant they'd stop cracking when I stood up. Unfortunately, the enchantment only works for vegetables and eggs, nature's way of reminding us that while we can save food, the best thing we can do for ourselves is practice yoga. Once you understand the ash method, it becomes clear why they've used it for decades. It's inexpensive, dependable, and has the extra virtue of perplexing anyone who enters your home and sees a bin full of eggs buried in ashes. When you explain it, they may look at you as if you have lost your mind. But hey, they'll be asking for your preserved eggs once their store-bought ones have spoiled. Isn't that always the way things go? Imagine a world where butter is more than just a condiment for toast, it's a food-saving superhero. While we're all trying to figure out how to keep leftovers from leaking, the Amish have solved the secret with nothing more than fat. When cooked meat is submerged in melted fat or tallow, it forms a smooth, airtight seal that keeps oxygen out, preventing microorganisms from joining the party. In other words, it's nature's version of Tupperware, but without the lids, which always seem to disappear when you need them. And it's not just any meat. Bacon, sausage, and even duck have been known to swim in fat pools for months on end, remaining as fresh as the day they were prepared. I'll confess it, the first time I tried sealing a roast in fat, I felt like a contestant on a survival reality show. When I opened the jar 2 months later, the meat was so delicate that it could have spent the previous 8 weeks at a spa. My family was not as impressed, however. Are we actually eating this? They inquired with skepticism and mild terror. I assured them that it was completely secure, but I can't say they were convinced. Here's why fat sealing works. No air means no deterioration. Without oxygen, bacteria have nothing to live on, therefore the food remains edible for months or even longer if kept chilled. This approach is not only about survival, it is also about flavor. The fat retains moisture, guaranteeing that the food tastes the same, if not better, after some time has passed. Consider it a marinade, but with the extra benefit of no expiration date. And here's a fascinating fact. This procedure, known as confit in French, has been used to keep duck legs delectable for generations. If it's good enough for French cooks, it must be good enough for everyone. What is the best part? It requires no special equipment, just a jar, some fat, and a little patience. But I'll warn you, make sure your fat is well filtered, otherwise you might wind up with some crispy bits swimming in there, unless of course you enjoy surprises. Speaking from experience, nothing rivals the delight of biting into what you thought was a soft piece of flesh, only to find a stray crumb of bacon. Fermentation isn't just a hipster craze from the farmer's market. Amish people have been doing it for centuries, long before kombucha became the drink of choice for people in yoga pants. The charm of fermented foods stems from their simplicity. Allow nature to do the work, and it will reward you with vegetables that can withstand the apocalypse and possibly even your finicky relatives. Sauerkraut, pickles, and beets are altered by bacteria that feast on sugars, resulting in acidic, long lasting classics. Now, if you think fermentation is as simple as putting cabbage in a jar and praying for the best, think again. It is a delicate dance. If you leave your sauerkraut too long, it may develop a stench that could ruin a family reunion. Too little, and you'll have soggy cabbage lying in brine, which isn't much better than a sad salad. The key is to strike a balance, allowing the healthy bacteria to take dominance before the harmful bacteria get their way. When I attempted making sauerkraut at home, I proudly announced that I was channeling my inner pioneer. What I wasn't expecting was the scent. Imagine opening a jar and your kitchen smelling like an old gym locker, only that locker could be fermenting something edible. But I stayed with it, and a few weeks later, I broke it open again to discover that beneath the weird aroma lied some of the crunchiest, most flavorful kraut I'd ever had. My cat, however, refused to enter the kitchen for several days. The physics behind fermentation makes it even cooler. No energy, no fancy gadgets, just a natural process as ancient as civilization itself. Some archaeological digs reveal that humans were fermenting food as early as 9,000 years ago. That suggests some ancient ancestor was probably nibbling on fermented foods while constructing the pyramids. And if it worked for them, it will also work for the Amish. Fermented foods are a gift that keeps on giving. The flavor improves over time and the shelf life lasts for years. It's like a foodie version of elegant aging. Do you think the first batch is good? Wait 6 months. And it gets even better. But here's some advice. Label your jars. I once forgot which jar was sauerkraut and which was pickled beets. Expecting one and tasting the other is quite a surprise. Fermentation is more than just preserving food. It is also about culture, pun intended. You're storing more than just food, you're preserving a piece of history by capturing flavors over time. For decades, the Amish have passed on these abilities in the same manner that they pass down recipes and quilts. There's no Wi-Fi or refrigerators, only a jar, some salt, and a lot of patience. It's also quite nutritious. It's like a culinary miracle. With no preservatives or chemicals, you can still receive probiotics that can outperform those sold in tiny, pricey vials at health food stores. And for those who grew up hearing, "eat your vegetables," the Amish have discovered the ultimate loophole. Let the vegetables to ferment, and you'll want to eat them. You know those jerky packages that folks grab at gas stations? The Amish presumably view of people as amateurs. For them, drying food is more than just road trip snacks. It's survival, plain and simple. Long before elegant electric dehydrators were available, they used the sun and wood furnaces to remove moisture from fruits, vegetables, and meats. Less moisture means less chance of mold or germs, which keeps the food edible for years, even decades if stored properly. Have you tasted sun-dried apples that are more than 10 years old? They're still surprisingly decent, but a little dry, similar to Grandpa's jokes. One Amish family I visited had shelves filled with jars of dried apples, pears, and even slices of venison, all of which seemed like they could survive us all. When you've got 7 kids to feed, the father remarked, you learn to make food last, or the food and the kids will disappear real fast. I can testify that those kids were speedy around food. Some dried foods, when stored properly, can endure up to 20 years. Imagine finding a forgotten jar of dried tomatoes at the back of a cupboard that is older than your adolescent but still edible. It's not just about survival, though. Drying food reduces space and weight, which is why dried apples, apricots, and beef strips became commonplace among farmers, travelers, and later astronauts. No kidding. NASA planned space meals based on age-old drying technologies. Back home, I tried drying some apple slices on a wooden tray in the sun, hoping to unleash my inner pioneer spirit. After a few hours, I returned to find the tray empty and my neighbor's dog sitting there, licking his chops. Lesson learned. The Amish understand not just how to dry food, but also how to protect it. The challenge is striking the perfect balance. Too much liquid left within. Mold will move in faster than relatives if you win the lottery. Too dry and your meal becomes a weapon. Have you ever tried biting into a piece of rock-hard jerky? If the apocalypse occurs, the jerky could serve as a building material. The Amish have also perfected the process of drying meat in wood-fired. It's more than just utilitarian. It smells fantastic. Walking into a room full with drying meat is like entering a gourmet restaurant with survival on the menu. And here's a fun fact: dried beef wasn't just for emergencies, it was also used as a snack in the past, something to chew on while tending to fields or building barns. There's no need for energy drinks when you have dried venison to keep you going. If your definition of treasure includes gold coins, you may be losing out. For the Amish, a decent root cellar stocked with potatoes, apples, and carrots is more valuable than any buried chest. Root cellars are nature's refrigerators, minus the unpleasant hum and the possibility of a power outage. These underground tunnels keep everything cold, dark, and just the proper amount of damp, ensuring that their harvest lasts through even the toughest winters. Ever wonder why root vegetables never seem to worry about shelf life? It's because they thrive in these cellars, where the temperature scarcely varies regardless of the weather outside. Root cellars maintain a consistent moisture level, while cool air prevents deterioration, much like a strict hall watch patrolling the shelves. When I first visited one, I assumed I had wandered upon a farmer's version of Narnia, walls lined with potato bins and rows of gleaming apples like small diamonds waiting to be picked. This ancient storage system has existed for nearly 2,000 years. The Romans, for example, used subterranean pits to store food, though I think Caesar would have exchanged his laurels for a few of those crisp carrots the Amish keep hidden. And here's the secret: apples preserved in root cellars taste better after a few months. They soften just enough, with tastes that smooth out like great wine, without the hangover the next morning. On a personal note, walking inside a root cellar feels similar to entering an old library, lacking the books but with a lot more turnips. There's something strangely fulfilling about knowing that all of this food will endure without using a single watt of electricity. It's also an effective workout. Trust me, hauling buckets of apples up and down those cellar steps makes you reconsider your complaints about grocery bags. I once offered to assist load a friend's cellar for the winter, assuming it would take a few hours. By the end, I had carried so many pumpkins that I could almost feel my biceps agitating for union rights. What's even better is how the Amish use root cellars as social hubs. People come by to give tips, trade products, and occasionally chuckle about how the old turnips in the corner still look better than most of us on Monday mornings. One elder informed me that the key to happiness is to have your root veggies well stocked and your neighbors guessing how you do it. Salt is more than simply a condiment for fries. It is a culinary warrior who has fought against spoiling for millennia. Historically, entire economies were founded around salt. They used it to pay Roman soldiers as well. It's no surprise that the Amish continue to use this ancient tactic. When you sprinkle something with enough salt, you're not simply adding flavor, you're declaring war on microbes. The Amish salt everything from meat to fish by piling it inside barrels filled with coarse salt until it resembles a snowdrift. Moisture is the enemy, and salt does more than just kick it out, it slams the door shut. Without moisture, germs cannot flourish, resulting in food that not only stays good, however, it is also possible to travel through time effectively. Some salted fish has been reported to last several decades. That's correct. This strategy predates refrigerators and may have more staying power than my New Year's resolutions. I once attempted to salt a ham thinking, how hard could it be? Spoiler alert, it was more difficult than a calculus exam. First, salt got everywhere, between my fingers, under my nails, and even into my shoes. Then I misjudged how much a thoroughly salted ham would weigh. Have you ever fought with a slippery, brined piece of pork? It's like attempting to carry a tantruming toddler. But hey, the ham lasted and tasted fantastic. The only drawback? I may still find salt crystals in the kitchen to this day. Salted food is not for the faint of heart. It requires patience and a lot of salt, but when done correctly, it rewards you with meat that tastes like it just came off the smoker, even years later. Pickles are more than simply sandwich friends. They are food storage superheroes. The Amish have figured out how to use vinegar to keep things edible long after they should have expired. It's quite brilliant. What begins as a simple cucumber eventually outlives the bread on which it was supposed to sit. That is the magic of vinegar. Foods soaked in this sour solution become impenetrable to microorganisms, much like secret agents who always have a way out. The Amish pickle everything, including cucumbers, eggs, beets, says beets and onions. Who knew vinegar could be used for both salad dressing and preservation? Pickling isn't anything new. Some historians believe the ancient Mesopotamians were at it long before Caesar considered conquering anything. What about the Amish? They have perfected it. Here's a weird fact. An unopened vinegar pickled jar can last for nearly 5 years. That kind of shelf life makes modern expiration dates seem like a joke. When I attempted to make my first batch of pickles at home, I learned a painful lesson. If you get the salt to vinegar ratio incorrect, you'll wind up with food that can strip paint or pickles that are softer than old chewing gum. My family bravely tried the first batch, but they've respectfully avoided my pickled attempts since. There's something strangely romantic about a jar of pickled eggs, those creamy whites floating serenely, waiting for their big day. They're the food equivalent of an old friend, dependable, consistent, and always ready to surprise you at a potluck. But here's an interesting thought. If I were a cucumber, I'd sign up to get pickled as well. I mean, who wouldn't want immortality in a jar? It's funny how basic fixes like these make high-tech gadgets seem superfluous. And just when you think you've seen everything, the Amish come up with another classic trick. When you think of smoked meals, you may envision outdoor barbecues or holiday feasts. However, for the Amish, it is an ingenious way to keep their meats wonderfully fresh for longer. Smoking food is more than simply a gourmet delight. It is also a time-tested method of preservation. As the smoke dances around the food, it creates a protective coating that helps to ward off infection, making it an ideal choice for the Amish pantry. The process starts with carefully chosen chunks of meat or fish. They are hung in a smokehouse where they absorb all of the smoky taste while drying. The smoke includes compounds that prevent bacterial growth, which is why smoked foods remain longer. In fact, properly smoked meats can last up to 2 years. That's like keeping a gourmet dish on hand for your next family gathering or unexpected guest. And sausages? They also smoke seafood and cheese. Consider taking a block of smoked cheddar from your pantry. Delicious and ready to impress. Here's an interesting fact. The practice of smoking food extends back thousands of years. Early civilizations learned that smoking foods not only improved flavor, but also increased shelf life. What a win-win. I recall my first effort to smoke chicken wings. I had all the enthusiasm in the world, smoke billowing, meat sizzling, the entire works, but when I cut into the wing, I realized I had been overly ambitious with the spices. My taste senses were fighting a fiery conflict, and all I wanted to do was enjoy dinner. It serves as a reminder that while smoking can be an art form, it is critical to maintain a consistent flavor profile. With the smoky richness that pervades every mouthful, it's no surprise that this approach has become a standard in Amish food preservation. It's a culinary tradition passed down through generations, enriching their tables with flavor and history. Herbs do more than just add flavor to your mashed potatoes. They can also be your food's best friend in the fight against spoiling. When you think of dried herbs, you may envision Grandma's spice rack, but in Amish kitchens, these bundles of green delight are more like a secret weapon for survival. Herbs such as rosemary and thyme have inherent antibacterial capabilities, making them ideal for food preservation. Instead of storing those lovely greens in the fridge, the Amish dry them and hang them from the kitchen ceiling, patiently waiting to lend flavor to everything from soups to stews. You might be surprised to hear that thyme has a very long history. The ancient Egyptians employed it to preserve mummies. Yes, mummies. So when you sprinkle thyme on your beef stew, you may feel assured that herb has been keeping food fresh for thousands of years. It's like keeping a culinary bodyguard in your spice cabinet. In the Amish way of life, these dried herbs serve two functions. They provide taste and keep food fresher for longer. Consider a winter stew simmering on the stove made with veggies from last summer's harvest and herbs that have been dried months ago. That's the type of hearty dinner that warms the soul and keeps you going when the weather outside is bad. One of my own culinary endeavors included attempting to dry oregano from my garden. I was prepared, believing I'd have plenty to season meals for months, but it turned out that my cat had different plans. Every time I turned around, he was slipping off with a leaf or two, like if my oregano were catnip. Lesson learned,